What I remember of my grandfather is, as a child growing up in very white 1970s Australia, his foreignness, his accent, his commitment to something that made no sense to me in the context that I was in. I remember a study that was just full of books, and I remember my grandfather as someone who really, for whom learning and knowledge were of enormous importance. And not just in the kind of standard Jewish parent way, but in a sense that these were keys to something. And I think that it's that sense of wanting to understand him better and that world that he came from that is one of the things that propelled me into the profession that I have. Which is as a historian and as a Jewish historian.
My grandmother, as typical Jewish grandmother, had a very special thing about us being a doctor or a lawyer, and so we have one lawyer and one doctor, and I think really, and our youngest master's degree, and I think I have my grandparents' passion for learning.
My father, through the Bund, that was his university. There were lectures and learning, and the drive to learn and to know was enormous. And he was, by all standards, a very educated man.
Because I remember saying something to my dad about observance, and my dad gave me quite a strong response, which was your Zayda is more Jewish down to his, I remember him using down to the tips of his nails and his toenails. Every reference he has is Jewish, as opposed to a lot of the people you're dealing with who call themselves observant. They're not. It's not as, your Zayda is completely, I think he said he's more Jewish than any of this stuff.
Because we were going to temple as children, as young families when we were young, and my cousins are older, and there'd been a bat mitzvah and a bar mitzvah that he didn't come to. Wouldn't come to shul.
The bar mitzvah
didn't come to shul. And then when it was my brother's bar mitzvah, he came, and afterwards he says, you call that a shul.
When we got married and Jake got called up, he came to the synagogue. That was a big deal, but he wouldn't have a call up. And then later in life, I remember a Friday night, I don't know if it's my father, asked him to make Kiddush. He made in perfect Ashkenaz Hebrew, without looking at anything, he made Kiddush. He knew it all, but he didn't believe in any of it.
The passion that was in the home did inform ultimately my Jewish identity, absolutely. And I guess it was a roundabout route. The Holocaust and the loss and the dislocation and the immigration and all those sorts of themes were felt very strongly. As a kid, it's hard to make sense of them. I was a pretty self-absorbed, kid, going to local state school, running around in the street, playing football, doing all those sorts of things. So there wasn't really a place for it in my sort of day-to-day life, but those themes were there and the passion was there.
I specifically remember as kids that they would sit on a Sunday afternoon often. They would come to visit Mum and our home, and everything was in Yiddish. And we were kind of sidelined. We didn't understand really, so we would just drift off. And it always sounded like they were arguing. And I once asked Mum, I said, why are you arguing? She said, we're not arguing, we're just talking about things. And it's my sort of memory or my feeling about Yiddish is that it's just passionate. Whatever they're discussing, it's passionate. So
and Zayda was like this engine. He was always kind of moving forward. He was the one who'd get up and say, we have to go.
Zayda he'd want to go, and Bubba would be still saying goodbye to everyone, and he'd say, Mama, nema taxi. I'm sure you've heard that story, but I remember that I remember that very well.
We used to make jokes about him that he needed one of these when he couldn't walk so well or so fast. He needed a little motorized vehicle to take him around, just to keep going. He just needed to keep going. And in fact, one of the earliest sounds that I remember as a very little girl was my father running down the stairs, and they were not carpeted stairs, and you could hear this as he went down the stairs. It was quite remarkable.
Dad was involved, of course, in the Bund, and he was on the committee. He was on the committee of the Kadimah, and also the Jewish welfare, or what it became later, and of course the Yiddish Sunday school.
There was a feeling of a new world which was going to be so good and so equal that even the Jews will have a better life and a better world. And he was no longer observant, but he had never tossed away the idea that he belonged to a golden chain, a chain of continuity, of hemshach, of Jewish life. And that's what he fought for the rest of his life, and his establishment of the Yiddish day school, Shalom Aleichem College, was part of that dream of his to continue that Jewish line.
I was only a tween or a pre-tween when the first planning for Shalom Aleichem College were begun. The Sunday school, the Peretz school was very successful, the Shalom Aleichem Sunday School was very successful, but the idea of establishing a day school, a college, was a radical, crazy idea, and naturally this sort of thing is driven by people who are very passionate, very ideological, very given to doing things the way it should be done, and sometimes there are clashes. So I do recall lots of phone calls with raised voices and powerful emotions, and sometimes meetings at our house, and there would be, I would go in to say goodnight or crawl under the table, and there were a circle of elderly, what seemed to me very elderly men sitting around a table, and sometimes thumping away at the table, saying, this is how it should be done, that's how it should be done, this is unacceptable, this is, we have to compromise. What does that word mean, compromise? So there was certainly a great deal of love and drive and passion to turn this dream into a reality.
If you think about what my grandfather did, I think it's extraordinary, because he grew up in an Orthodox family. He found Bundism. He rejected what he'd grown up in. He gets married, and then he picks up and he moves to another country and starts life over there again, and eventually brings his wife over and sets himself up and establishes himself, and really is becoming quite successful as a businessman, and then of course disaster hits, and lives through that, and then picks up and does the same thing all over again. I just think that's incredible.
By this time, 1942, I was 8, and suddenly we had to wear the yellow star. And so my mother sewed a yellow star on my coat. And with that, I was told to carry my satchel in such a way that I was hiding the yellow star. And the next thing that happened was that I no longer went to my school. I started going to a Catholic school. So that was the time when there was a decree that Jewish children were not allowed to go to school. So I went to Catholic school for 3 weeks or so. Then it must have been the end of the school year. The next thing that I knew, we were on a tram, my mother and the two of us, and a friend, a Belgian friend. And we were going somewhere. And when we got to this place, which was a children's holiday home, I have an image of my mother sort of bending down to me, and the next minute she was gone. We were both left there. It was a beautiful sunny day. There was, there were swings and slides and things in the backyard, in the sort of backyard, and lots of children running around very happy. My parents still came to visit on a Sunday, and when they came to visit, they realised there were a whole lot of Jewish children there, and the parents had the same, idea that this would be a place. After that, they decided that this wasn't really going to be safe. We went, both of us, to the next place. We went to a couple who had always been fostering children. So, in actual fact, at that time, they must have had 6 or 7 Jewish children. And the man was very, very unpleasant. He used to say to us things like, if the Germans catch you, terrible things will happen to you. Mum came down there one day, and when she saw what the place was like, and she went away and found somewhere else for us. After that place, we were separate. On one occasion, I spent quite a few months with a very devout Catholic woman who took me to church, and that was actually my first introduction to the Bible, because she had a children's Bible with the Old Testament and the New Testament, but I read the Old Testament, and for the first time I came across something that definitely had to do with Jews. We at home didn't keep any of the religious festivals. We didn't keep the Shabbat. My mother didn't light candles. So there was nothing very specific that I could connect with being Jewish. I must have known the word, but really no more than that. When I came back to my parents after the war, very, very soon, the community started up the Yiddish Sunday school. We learned to write. We didn't have any books in the beginning, so we couldn't learn to read, but we learned to write, and we learned poems, and we recited, and I enjoyed it enormously. I really loved it.
During the war, I was in hiding, and I was in hiding with a Gentile family, a very beautiful family. And after the war, in 1949, we came to Australia. But till then, after the war, straight after the war, I started going to a Yiddish school.
The thing that I thought, especially when I was younger, was that in terms of passing something on to the next generation, language wasn't going to do it. Especially that the language didn't mean to me, never would mean to me what it meant to my father. And language is, as I learned, it's all of you. It's all of you and your experiences.
There was enormous discussion of the Jewish world. So it went beyond
it's like just understanding, I think we all got it, this understanding of how rich the Jewish world was. So whether it was your Yiddish commitment or your theatric commitment or your Hebrew commitment or Israel, but the more elements of it that you could partake in, the richer your Jewish life was.
I used to go to the Jewish religious instruction at the primary school, and we had family friends who were going to temple, and I asked if I could go to Sunday school with them.
And one day she came, she said she wanted to do a bat mitzvah, and I was very nervous about that because I had no idea what this was. But I know that I was happy that she was making that choice, and I was backing her with it, and I think my husband was too. Oh, and then she also came home one day and said, we should be lighting candles on Friday night, and so I was 33 by then. It felt very strange. I'd never seen it done even.
My mother used to drop me off at the service on Yom Kippur in Moorabbin and go home. And then she sort of started getting a bit interested.
When we started having the first Seder that I ever made, which I had not had at home, in my home, when it came to making a Seder in the home that I established with my husband, we had 3 children, and the 5 of us sat down the first time, and on the one occasion, I think it was actually on the first occasion I made it, I asked my parents to come. And my father said he doesn't go to a Seder. And it happened to fall on the 20th of April, which happens to be Annette's birthday. So he made the comment, but I'll come to my granddaughter's birthday. Not coming to a Seder, I'm coming to my granddaughter's birthday.
Stuff about Yiddish, about us learning
Oh,
Yiddish
yeah,
or
of
not
course.
learning Yiddish.
Yeah.
There were some very, very strong feelings and opinions that we were shielded from. We didn't even know. And also, but one of the things we did know was when I got married. When I got married, for some reason, I can't remember why, but they saw the prototype of the invitation, and my Zayda lost his cool and
But he
said
announced he wasn't coming.
he will not come to the wedding. There is no Yiddish on the invitation. He will not attend. So my husband-to-be, who's my husband now, Mark, not really understanding what he was dealing with, thought that he would just go. He said, "I'll go over and talk to him." And he went over, and he came back. He looked a bit shell-shocked. He didn't really know what had happened, but he had not made headway. So then Mum said, "Let me go and talk to them." And she went off to speak to him.
I'll never forget
And
it.
she came back to the house, and it is one of the funniest scenes in our memory. Mum walked in, she waved the invitation, and she said, "Peace in our time." They did come to the wedding, happily. Mum said, "I don't think you understand how much it means to them that you're all marrying Jewish people and that you're going to continue Jewish life." And the passion that they had for Jewish life was conveyed to us all.
I think right through, all of us sort of became more connected to Judaism, and we've had Seder's together and Shabbatot, and yes, and that brought our kids up that way.
Well, he went from being a ferocious Bundist to being a very well-to-do middle-class Jew in Australia who accepted the existence of Israel. I think that actually if I get anything, if I live anything from what my grandparents had, what I love about the Bund was its idea of dual Kayt, that you make your Jewish life where you are. That's what I believe very strongly, so I make my Jewish life here in Australia. Religion doesn't really play a part in my life, and it's lovely to be Jewish and to have the luxury of saying, well, I'm absolutely undoubtedly Jewish, but I don't go to shul.
Well, Nachman and Gryfenberg was instrumental and central in establishing the school and establishing the ethos of the school that permeates to this day in everything that it does. Without him, it wouldn't have happened.
And later on, when I understood what my grandfather had achieved in his role in establishing a Jewish day school, I was very proud.
My recollection of Zaida dying, I remember us all there and around the bed, and I remember Zaida was not particularly lucid, but we were all in the room, and he opened his eyes and he looked around us and he clapped, and I really felt we should be clapping.
His daughters, Floris and Danielle, hold an outsized place within the Yiddish community. Danielle would universally be regarded as the queen of Yiddish in Melbourne at the moment. She's the go-to person for everybody in questions of grammar and translation and proper usage. A wonderful, wonderful teacher. Floris is a wonderful translator, and both of them are modestly, humbly contributing an enormous amount to Yiddish life in Melbourne.